Приветствую вас на канале Russian School Online, с вами Вероника, и сегодня у меня в гостях Мэри Греф. Мэри преподает русский как иностранный в Остин Комьюнити Колледж. Она расскажет, почему студенты выбирают русский язык, что для них самое сложное, а что учить легче всего, как сдать челлендж экзамен и не ходить на пары, и что делать родителям, чьи дети отказываются говорить дома на русском языке.
Я читала, я не читала, я прочитала или читала, и не знаю, я ела или я съела, или я поела. Ну что это за безобразие? Так нельзя. Exactly.
Thank you, Mary, for taking time and jumping on a call. Could you please introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Mary Greff. I teach Russian at Austin Community College. I also teach Russian 406 at the University of Texas. When they need me, I jump in to teach some of those courses. I started studying Russian in high school, actually. They offered high school in a small town in Iowa. I took a 10-day trip in 1992. I hardly understood anything in Russian, and I thought, oh, I want to do this. So I started studying at the University of Notre Dame. I studied abroad in St. Petersburg. After graduating with a degree in Russian and anthropology, I spent a year in Latvia teaching English. And then I went back to the University of, to the States, and the University of Kansas. I received a master's and studied again in St. Petersburg because I loved it so much. And yeah, so I have a master's in Russian and 20 years of experience teaching Russian to non-native speakers.
Why did you decide to learn Russian?
Honestly, everyone asks that question. Probably the first reason is because my brother, who was 2 years older, he took it and was involved in a program with the Soviet Union. He was older than I, and he did a tour of all the several cities in the Soviet Union at the time, and came back with all of these photos and all these experiences. And I thought, now that's, just fascinating, because in those days, that was something we didn't know a whole lot about. And so that was in the late 80s. So that probably sparked my interest.
The language is always developing. How do you keep up with it?
I watch a lot of movies. I probably watch 3 or 4 a week. And I just go on YouTube and just whatever pops up next, as long as for me, it's not as much even about the content or the quality. It's about, is it being produced in Russia? Is it showing what's happening there, even if it's dramatized or, melodrama? It doesn't matter for me. I want to hear what's happening with the language, what's the cues of, are they navri ili nati, and how are they interacting? That to me is the most important. So I do watch a lot of movies. It isn't even, I don't even know where the movies come from that popped up, right? But there was one, I think it was called Mushna Chess, which, I mean, it's not even, I don't know if you've ever even heard of it. It's not popular or anything, but it popped up and it had this great exchange between a child and an older adult. And it was all about the father. And the whole exchange was, как ваше отчество? Значит, как зовут отца? And so in class, I was introducing отчество, and that, the whole idea of where do they come from? And so I put it on an exam, and it was one that was Yevgenyevich and Sergeyevich. And so my question, what are the fathers' names of these two characters? So just little things like that the movie itself, I'm not sure I even remembered, and I thought the ending was like, what? But that little set, so I just wanted to pull that out, that little section that had this exchange of real language. I even at ACC, for their final exam, it always includes a movie and different movies. In the fall, I use Ironia Sutby. I've used Utamilnya Sonsum, Burnt by the Sun. I've used Brilliantovaya Ruka. And what else have I used? Oh, I used Peter FM one year. That was just kind of a fun with all the scenes from St. Petersburg. And I try to bring out, that's their culture and their listening section of the final. And I pull out all sorts of not just language things, but cultural things. And so much comes up in movies that is important, and so important that I feel like I'm going to put it on the final, that they have to watch it, analyze it, we talk about it.
So the best advice to learn Russian would be watch movies.
Yes, if you're not there, right? I mean, the best is to be there and to be surrounded by Russians. And if you can't, then yeah, constantly having that language and cultural and, input is really important.
In your class, what percentage of students come already knowing at least a little bit of Russian, and what percentage starts from the zero?
I would say, that's a hard question, but I would say probably maybe 50-50. I think a lot of students come up, but when you say experience with Russian, sometimes that might just be Duolingo. So a lot of students start on their own and they'll try something like Duolingo, or they'll go online and look at some of the lessons and then go, whoa, this is hard. I think I need a guide through that. In terms of students who have a background like parents or speak it at home, fewer. I probably have one or two per class, maybe 2 or 3 out of, say, 15, something like that.
Why do your students choose Russian? Those who already know a bit of Russian take your class to get an easy A, I would guess. What about those who learn it from very beginning? Do you ask this question?
I do. Every semester, it's part of my introduction. Why are you taking this class? And honestly, it's rare that they say, well, I just needed a language, so I randomly chose Russian. It's rare that happens. Sometimes someone says something, but usually I have groups of students. Sometimes it's people who really have a propensity for language. So these are students who already know maybe 4 languages or 5, and they want to add another language. Yeah, I have. It's amazing how many students just want that language, and they have a linguistics kind of mind, I guess. So that's one. One, they've seen a movie, or they, like saw a bunch of spy movies, and they're like, wow, Russian is very, it's this romantic, I guess history. There's this aura around Russian that they'd like. I oftentimes will have people who may be married into a family of Russian speakers. And so they'd like to be able to talk to their spouse's parents, for example. There's a group of students who want to travel there. And so they'll take 1 or 2 semesters of Russian, just so when they go to Russia, maybe on a tour, maybe it's just one of the, the cruises or something that stops, but they want to get a little bit of the language, which of course means they're getting some of the culture. And so they can read the signs, for example, right? So, and then lately I've gotten a lot of people who have somehow developed pen pals and now want to, and I don't even know where they found how they found pen pals. Maybe they were interested in Russian first, but they've come and said, okay, I really want to be able to communicate better with my pen pal.
Is it helpful to have students who already speak Russian, or are they a bit distractful?
I love having students who already have some Russian, partly because I can then pair them with students who don't, and they're usually incredibly helpful, and it kind of gives a good balance in that. It's just something you have to manage. You have to make sure that they're still motivated and not completely bored, especially if it's Russian 1. Because the first thing in Russian 1 is alphabet, im skучно. Like it's kind of boring, like be, and they already know those things. But the flip side of that, what I think is interesting is how many times I have students who actually have, a very, maybe at least a Russian 2 or Russian 3 even level of knowledge of Russian, who are going back to the beginning and have these aha moments, like, I've never thought of it that way, or, oh, wow, I've been speaking this language for a while and I never thought that that's why they say that. Or so there's always something, even for myself. I think I learn something every single time I teach it or take it. So that's kind of the flip side.
Did you encounter stereotypes about the Russian language and Russians in class?
Yeah, definitely. And so one of the big things about, and we have a good textbook that also kind of guides you through, even if there's for example, reasons why, a Russian might use more commands. And there's then a stereotype that talks about this, ordering people around and then saying, no, understand that there's a use of language that you say, передайте мне, пожалуйста, соль, or whatever it is, as opposed to, would you mind perhaps sending me the, right? It's a different type of language. And there's so many opportunities to show, well, this is, that's a stereotype, but look this is where it comes from, and this is why. And this is why that's just a different, you can dispel those because of looking at the reasons behind some of those stereotypes.
What kind of stereotypes do you encounter most often?
Oh, they don't typically talk about them quite as much. Usually, drinking, that usually comes up, vodka, and then facial expressions and how facial smiling and facial expressions are different. That always comes up. Trying to think, those are probably the two big stereotypes I think that come up. Is the kind of overall the demeanor of how one's facial expression, if you don't, to strangers, is different. And I like to go both ways. I have some native Russians who've sent me some cute videos about of them telling their friends who might come to the United States, beware, everybody smiles at you and it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with them. It's just what they do here. And students get a kick out of that because we kind of go from the other way and say, hey, by the way, you might have these stereotypes, but this is what they think of you. And we get a good laugh, but it's such a good learning experience.
In your opinion, what's the easiest topic for your students to learn?
It depends on the level. For my beginning students, that whole notion of case, right? And understanding why does kniga have to change when they say "Я читаю книгу" или "Я говорю о книге." They just don't get it because to them it's a book. And so that whole concept of endings, because we don't have it in English, that's hard in the beginning. As they progress, it's understanding aspect, right? Совершение, and trying to figure out why it's я читала, я не читала, я прочитала или читала, не знаю. And there's always these like, why? Because for us, right, we don't have that. And so, we use tense where Russian uses aspect, and that is so hard to feel, right? It's something that if you're not a native speaker, you have to go about it by list. So, learning it, you have to say, well, did I complete the book? Yes. But does the other speaker care about that? Or do I care as a speaker? Do I care that I finished it? No. Okay, well, then you're imperfective. Like, having to go through each of those processes every time I pick a verb. Я ела или я съела, или я поела. Having to go through and try to figure out what I want to say and is it correct? And that aspect, I think I'll learn it for the rest of my life because I think, oh, I've got it, and then all of a sudden I'll be watching one of my movies and I'll say, what? Why did they say cielo? And I think isn't that just общий факт? Or, these little things that come up. And then the other thing that throughout, I think every non-native speaker's life trying to learn Russian is stress. Ударение. Where is that stress? Why did it go from окно to окна? And then what's the difference between окна and окна? And stress, because you can't predict it in Russian. It changes in the word. Right. And any new word, right? Russian texts don't have that in them. They don't tell us where to put it. So that is probably the other thing that's really difficult.
And what's the easiest topic?
The easy. You know what? One thing that students come in so afraid of the alphabet, and that actually within a week and a half, they've got it. Most students within about a week and a half or two, they don't really even think about the alphabet as much. And so that's something I think that students are surprised about. They think, oh my goodness, the alphabet and Russian seems so hard. I said, it might be hard, but not because of the alphabet. Just wait until we get into, genitive plural, right? Then you can start being upset, right? But the alphabet's probably the easier part.
What's the most difficult word, phrase, or rule of the Russian language for foreigners in terms of pronunciation?
I would say certain combinations of especially the beginning of words, things that we would never put a fha at the beginning, the f ha or something at the beginning of a word, and that's hard for students to get out. But as a general rule, I think it's soft consonants. It's all of that. It's so hard to get our tongues to do that certain ways. Same thing with the R's in Russian are really hard because we don't have that in English. And it's not quite a rolled R, they call it a flapped R. And trying to explain how to do that and to get your tongue to do that. And there are days that у меня получается, and then there's days that почему-то у меня никак не получается, like just even that sound, right? And it's when you're tired or something that isn't coming out right. So trying to teach students, like right now I have 2 beginning classes, and trying to explain to them, because they can't always hear it, right? They can't hear sometimes the difference between ma and might, and trying to explain what's happening and to try to do that. And they're like, I don't hear a difference. I'm like, well, let's see what we can do so that you can at least try to produce it correctly. So I'm trying to tell them where to put their tongue and what happens with the vowel I, you know, a little bit.
Uh-huh.
All of that, I think that it's soft consonants.
Uh-huh.
And then maybe sometimes the sounds like sha and sha, je, those, because to us we have sh and sh, but why is there a difference, and what happens? They can't hear the difference there.
Okay.
And uy, that's not, sorry, like so many sounds in Russian that are hard, but uy, Yuri is the other one.
Как научить иностранца произносить звук «ы»? И. Обратите внимание, что при произношении этих двух звуков «и», «ы» в нашем речевом аппарате меняет положение только язык. Все остальное, зубы и губы, остаются на месте. Так вот, звук «и», скорее всего, они могут произносить. Попросите их поставить свой речевой аппарат в позицию произношения звука «и», взять карандаш и вставить, засунуть, положить его в рот. При этом произнося звук «и» и отодвигая язык так, чтобы не касаться этого предмета. При этом форма языка не должна меняться.
What textbooks do you use and how do you choose them?
Right now in my, at ACC, we use Troika. Probably have it somewhere. That's Numakovsky's book. I like it. It has a good mix of cultural information, grammar information. The vocabulary, I think, is a good sampling of what one would need for the first, few semesters. And it has a good pace to it. And so in a lot of universities, that's a really popular book. So it's kind of nice to have something that if my students transfer to A&M, for example, that'll be the same textbook that they use there. He uses different materials. They've actually developed their own online course for Russian. Dr. Rice developed it. They're fantastic. And it's a whole program of videos and grammar explanations. And so that's, it's fantastic. It's fun to get to use that at UT.
There is such a thing as testing out, where a student can take tests and prove his or her knowledge of Russian language. However, there is not much information on what level the student should be to pass. Could you please give some information on when it's worth trying and when it would be better to take a class?
Sure. So I can speak about Austin Community College only. That's the only one I'm involved in terms of the testing out of. But at ACC, you take a challenge exam. So you basically are saying, I'm going to challenge Russian 1411, for example. And you're just saying that you have the knowledge of this equal knowledge of what one would gain in the class Russian 1411.
Okay.
And so if you think about it, Russian 1411 is one semester. It's a 4-credit class for students who have, it's designed for students who have no background in Russian whatsoever. So how much progress, right, would a non-native speaker of Russian make in a 4-credit class at our institution? And so the other way to look at it you can look at the syllabi online and say, okay, well, they cover 6 chapters of our textbook, Troika. Which, by the way, I'll say later. Anyway, 6 chapters of Troika, and then if you wanted to challenge the second semester, that's Russian 1412, and you say, okay, well, they go through units 7 through 12. So you can look at what do they cover in units 7 through 12. Is that something I know? Is that something I'm comfortable with? If so, you can challenge. And then Russian 2311, it's the last 6 chapters of Troika. So you can see by looking at the syllabus whether you feel like you have all of that information. Usually that's not an issue because I only put a few questions like that on there. Usually, I give you a choice over something and it'd be like, I'm trying to think, я читаю, and then I give you a choice, книгу или книга or something. And so even if I have to think about it. I don't usually ask you to like label the cases because the idea is, if you're able to use them, then that's okay. Because we talk about cases just because that's the only way we don't have a natural instinct to like if you're not a native speaker, like why would I ever think to change kniga to knigu? So we have to teaching it as a foreign language, we have to kind of start from those rules.
Right.
But if a student knows Russian very well, they're not going to have a problem on that challenge exam, even if they don't know all of those specific rules. I just want to see that someone has the knowledge, not that they are able to break it down. That's really helpful for teachers, right? That's not necessary for students. If you're already able to speak it that way, yeah, I don't think I've never seen that that's a problem.
And for challenge exams, do you get grades or pass, no pass?
I assign grades, and I believe you have to get an A or a B on the exam, but I'm not sure it goes as part of your GPA.
Oh,
That makes
okay.
sense. I'm not sure it's incorporated in the GPA, but in order to get credit, you have to get an A or a B.
Can those grades for challenge exams be transferred to the next university?
It depends on the university.
Okay.
My guess is it goes on your transcript as credit. So if the next university accepts that credit for yes, and there probably are some universities that don't. It probably depends on where they're transferring to.
Okay.
But I'm not 100% certain on that. Yeah.
Let's talk online versus in person. Do you think it's more beneficial to meet online or no?
That's so interesting. I mean, I think because Russian, we typically only have one Russian, one class, and ACC, serves such a large area that probably the online format is actually a really good format. I went ahead and did an in-person because I wasn't sure if there were people who really wanted to be in the classroom and wanted to be like holding up a newspaper. I don't know. I mean, I don't have very many. We started with 12 because of COVID restrictions, and I want twice as many students to start out studying Russian. So I think that having online where people can join from wherever and that flexibility is actually really nice for a language like Russian, where they only have one choice and one campus and one class. Does that make sense? Things that I like, it's so easy as I'm teaching to like, oh, I'm going to share my screen. Oh, let me show you this. And, then I can hold things up, or, I can have all of that information from my computer or anything in my background. If I wanted to put a poster up or something behind me, I don't have to drag all of that into a classroom. So there's a lot that I like. I mean, you should have seen, I had a huge bag on Tuesday of stuffed animals and Masha from Masha and Medved's, and I had, knижки, all of these different things as props to practice. У вас есть книга? Да, есть. Ну, какая у вас книга? Like all of those, I had to bring this huge thing, and if we were here, we would have a different, everybody could just grab something and show, whatever it is. So I don't know. There's definitely benefits of being online.
And from students' perspective, do you see more interest when they are online or when they are in class?
That also depends on the student. It depends on what's going on. The drawback of online is if a student isn't necessarily motivated by the information. In other words, if a student's more interested in the grade than that, then you can oftentimes see, television going on their backs of their, or reflecting off their eyelids. I'm like, are you listening to me? And then, that kind of thing. I'm like, they aren't, or sometimes you'll hear it going on. I'm like, are you not caring? So that's the drawback. You can't do that in class. Although, sometimes students sleep in class. So, I mean, you never know. But I think usually if someone's physically present, they really have to engage because you're physically right there. And so that might be one thing that online can be, that there's a lot of distractions, right? If someone has two screens, they're like, oh, I had that email, next thing you know, they're gone. So that'd be the one thing.
And the last question to wrap up our interview. What would you say to those kids who can easily learn Russian at home from their parents, but they refuse to?
I say to the parents, keep at it. Just stick to your guns, keep speaking Russian. I know that there is a tendency, especially in certain ages, of students to kind of reject that a bit. They are still hearing it. They're still going to be able to produce it. And when they are ready, and it's very rare that there doesn't come a time when a student isn't ready to speak it. They do. And what I get the fun of these students coming in who have different motivations. They might think, oh, I'm just going to get an easy A, check that off my list. And it's fascinating within the first couple weeks of class, even if they refused at home to speak, all of a sudden they're realizing the value of all of that knowledge that they have. They get excited about helping classmates. They contribute to class by talking about cultural things, right? Because we have students who have no idea about Russian culture. And then we have a student who has a lot of experience, and it's fun to watch them kind of come alive and get excited about this culture that they may or may not have seemed to have shown a lot of interest in. And all of a sudden they're like, oh yeah, my parents do this, or, oh, we used to go to the dacha with grandma, and you know, she used to make us do this, or the banya, or whatever, you know, that those experiences are. And it enlivens the class. And it oftentimes brings these students a greater appreciation for the culture, and definitely for the language, because they sit there and they watch us poor native, you know, non-native speakers, and you know, struggling to try to get them to understand a case, or you know, what these things mean. And these students are like, "Phew, thank goodness I have an instinct for this," right? They just don't have to think about that. And all my other students are like, let's see, it's a direct object, so I have to take kniga, and it's feminine, right? And that process is what non-native speakers are going through. And these heritage speakers they just get it. And so they get to kind of look at this class from a different perspective, like, oh, isn't that interesting? That's how they have to learn it. And so they get this appreciation. So I think, and then, you know, reading and writing and some of those things, they can kind of hone their skills sometimes for students who haven't had that at home. Maybe they just spoke it. Mm-hmm. And it's fun to watch them engage and be excited about something that maybe they took for granted before. And then when they get in there and they realize, wow, this is, yeah, I'm really lucky that I have some of this knowledge, because it certainly makes anything from pronunciation to those cases to things like vit aspect, it makes all of that just kind of all falls into place for them. So I say, even if they're, you know, not wanting to speak it necessarily right now, my guess is that there will come a day that they will be incredibly grateful that they have that background.
And on this positive note, we are ending our interview. Thank you so much, Mary, for coming.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Ставьте лайки и подписывайтесь на наш канал. До встречи в следующем видео.